Peter, do you have any sense from what we've seen, do you have any sense from the Pentagon or the White House that asking for this much money at a time when so many Americans are struggling risks what little support they still have for this war?
Yeah, there's certainly a concern in Republican circles about whether this fits in with the argument about affordability, right? If this midterm election is going to be fought on the basis of who has done more to make lives more affordable, certainly the president has an argument that is hard to make, that we're spending $500 billion more on defense spending. And he himself said recently that means we can't spend it on health care. We can't spend it on child care. We can't spend it on other priorities that may be more immediate to a lot of voters. The other thing voters are seeing, of course, is the price of the pump go up substantially, $1.50 more than when this war started per gallon, and that's only going to go higher if there's not a resolution anytime soon. We're also seeing impact from the war on things like food prices, because fertilizer, which comes out of that Strait of Hormuz, is now being blocked, which may have a big impact on crops. So a lot of Americans are asking, including a lot of Republicans who are asking the White House, what are you going to do about cost of living while you're focused on this Iran war? And the president has said, well, we have to have some short-term pain while we get rid of Iran's nuclear capability. But a lot of Americans don't see it that way.
Yeah, in both of these hearings, Paul, there were a lot of questions about both what did that $29 billion get us and where has it left us, but also what is that $1.5 trillion actually going to buy? And there seem to be a lot of non-answers there. So let me ask you, what's your sense of what the American taxpayers is getting for all this money?
They don't feel like a whole lot.
No, they
Looks
don't.
like higher gas prices, more inflation, higher fertilizer prices, the cost of living keeps going up. And they want to, I think it's really important to take a step back. They want to increase the overall defense budget by 40%. $1.5 trillion. And they don't want accountability. I think that's what this is really all about. This is going to be part of the normal defense budget process that may extend into the fourth quarter of this year when they finally get a vote. They know they can't have an up or down vote on Iran. So they're putting everything into this. This is a dream wish list of everything that they want, also with no accountability. So they're hoping that the American people will get tired, that they won't be held accountable. This will eventually go through maybe around Christmas time, and they'll get what they want, which is ultimately the biggest spending budget we've seen really since World War II, and no accountability, for example, on the $400 million that's supposed to go to Ukraine, which is less than 1%. They can't account for when that's going to get spent or where it's going to go. And not to bury the lead, they jumped from a $25 million expense to $25 billion expense to $29 billion just today. That's breaking news. It's not $25 billion. It's now $29 billion. And your gas prices are going up toward $5 a gallon. So I don't think most Americans are feeling a value here, and it feels like we're getting ripped off.
Yeah, and it's all happening at a time, I think we have to say, David, when the American people were told that this was going to be a short war, right? And it has not been a short war. There's no end in sight. And the secretary says we're winning the war. By all objective accounts, it's stuck in a stalemate. So did we get any new insight today about where they intend to take this war and how their exit strategy is lining up?
No, we did not hear a strategy here at all. I mean, the president is going to go to Beijing and ask President Xi, ask China to help us with the war we started. There's no clear strategy in the Strait. There was a very strong Bloomberg piece written a few days ago about this operation that was launched with 100 American aircraft. This is when they tried to open it last week. That was stopped because the U.S. didn't tell Saudi Arabia and Kuwait we were going to do that. So they closed their airspace. They might relaunch that. But the cost of that is also millions of dollars. Having 100 aircraft and drones in the air, it's millions a day. It would quickly become billions of dollars to reopen the Strait. So the cost of all this is causing the American military to sort of pull punches. And it's just this way of waging war in this hugely expensive manner with these incredibly expensive weapon systems, when we're seeing from the Ukrainians and the Iranians that there are these cheaper drones to do it. The big cost that we didn't hear about today that everyone was asking about, I watched it all morning in the House and today in the Senate, 228 structures and pieces of equipment were hit by Iranian drones and missiles on 15 different American bases in the Middle East. That is not part of this new total today. And so, and how can you not, the comptroller here, Jules Hurst, says we don't have an exact number for it. We don't know how we're going to rebuild the bases. That's not a real answer. So this is going to cost even more than the $29 billion they're talking about at this point.
So, Ali, last time Hegseth testified, I think it's fair to say it was pretty explosive. It was different this time around. Yeah. Certainly less confrontational outside of maybe Patty Murray. What did you take away from this today?
Yeah, a markedly different tone from Hegseth here today, Chris. And I think it's interesting to watch Republicans sort of press the bounds of the way that they will show their impatience with this ongoing Iran war, because this is really the moment where they can exercise their leverage over the purse strings. And there's a few different funding mechanisms that are actually at play here. You hear your panel rightly talking about the jump in price tag from $25 to $29 billion on the Iran war specifically, and the fact that that figure is not complete for the reasons that David Rohde just laid out. But there's also concern from lawmakers here, appropriators through and through, that there are other funding mechanisms that the administration is asking for money in. So there's the Iran war price tag. There's this looming idea of a supplemental funding bill for who knows how much money. That would effectively put Congress on the hook for funding a war that they did not get the chance to authorize. That's something else that they were asked about here today. The idea that this war is in its 70-plus day, and the administration, as much as they'd like to say they've paused the clock before the 60-day threshold that would require Congress to vote and act, there is clear disagreement, at least from some Republicans, on the way that Congress has been sidelined here. Again, it's not clear that there's enough Republican concern to actually force a vote in a meaningful way that would hem the administration in here. But I do think as we're watching all of this happen in a midterm year that will be centered around affordability, the numbers matter. The fact that it is likely to continue climbing matters. And the fact that this Congress, which has largely given the administration a pass in whatever capacity it wants, is starting to ask some targeted questions about how much things cost, when they're going to come to them for supplemental funding, and then also what they knew about the Strait of Hormuz and the likelihood that it would be closed or restricted. That is the center of the economic pain being felt from this Iran war right now. And so, again, if we're reading tea leaves just from the Republicans willing to ask questions echoed by Democrats, I thought that this hearing was instructive in that it gave us a little bit of insight into where the Republican thinking publicly is, despite the fact that privately, I'm sure many of us have heard what I hear, which is that Republicans are very concerned about the ways that the Iran war is harming their chances in a midterm election that was already going to be quite difficult.
There's the politics of this, obviously, but also, Paul, there is the reality of this, of what's happening, not just in Iran, but also in Ukraine. And the one thing that Pete Hegseth did say without any specificity is there are some DOD officials who have gone over to take a look at what they're doing, what Ukraine is doing both offensively and defensively in terms of drones. But as Senator Coons pointed out, this request is coming at a time when both Iran and Ukraine have been able to hold their own against much better funded, much better, presumably operational in the real world, and much more equipped armies, navies, Marines, you name it. And yet here we still are. So do you think the Pentagon's budget reflects that reality, or we just don't know because we don't know where they're planning to spend this money or how they've spent it so far?
I think that this proposed budget reflects Trump's reality and what he wants to achieve and what Hegseth want to achieve. And I've long said that the most important story in the world is that Donald Trump can do anything he wants with the most powerful military the world has ever seen, and nothing is stopping him. This is the first thing that can actually stop him. Remember, they haven't had an actual hearing on Iran. This is not a hearing on Iran.
Right.
This is on the budget. They failed to have a War Powers Act, right? They don't want accountability around Iran. And apparently they don't want to talk about Putin and Russia. They don't want to talk about the threat of China. They want to continue to talk about Iran, which I think most Americans can now see is becoming a sucking chest wound for our military and for our economy. So what they want to do is circumvent the process, get no oversight, and have a blank check. So anyone who votes in favor of this budget is voting for a blank check for Donald Trump to do anything he wants. And it might be the only hearings we actually have on defense issues between now and the end of the year. So Republicans should be here in the crosshairs and feeling the pressure, because if they vote yes on this, they're not just voting yes on Iran and what comes next, they're also apparently voting yes on Cuba, because he said he wants to hit Cuba next. They're voting in favor of forever war with no guardrails and a total blank check. That's what today is really about.
And, Peter, a recent Reuters poll found that 66% of Americans say the administration still has not made the case for this war 2.5 months after it started. Approval of the war keeps going down. So just kind of picking up on what you were saying earlier, does the administration feel there needs to be any work done? Are they doing any work to try to build approval, or do they just feel like it's all going to work itself out in the end?
Yeah, this is the first war that an American president has gotten into since the advent of polling that didn't have the support of more Americans than not when it got started. In other words, most wars that become more unpopular over time as things go badly. This was unpopular from the start. He never had the support of the American people for this war because he never explained it, as you rightly said. He now is trying to say, well, it's all about stopping Iran from having a nuclear weapon. He hasn't explained why it is that they were about to get a nuclear weapon in the first place when he told us just a few months earlier that he had already obliterated their nuclear program during that bombing campaign last summer. The intelligence has said that they are just as far away from having a nuclear weapon as they have ever been, about a year away, not 2 weeks away, which some Trump supporters have used as some sort of a metric, which doesn't seem to be based on any actual intelligence. So most Americans are confused. Iran has been seeking nuclear power for an awful long time. Why now? Trump hasn't really explained that. He's episodically come out from time to time and tried to sort of make the case. He gave an Oval Office address, didn't seem to make much of a difference. And instead, I think they're banking on the idea that they can find a way to wrap this up soon. People will move on. They'll think about other things. Trump has a remarkable skill for changing the subject and changing people's attention to other things. But given how long this has gone on, and given the intractability of this, and given the fact that it doesn't seem to be an obvious diplomatic resolution that he can sell as a victory and that Iran would accept, he's really in a box here.